Before we start, I just wanted to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land. We're all meeting on different lands across the state of Victoria today, and I certainly pay my respects to those leaders who have been involved in netball in particular today. So I'm sure, like the rest of us here at Netball Victoria, you're very anxious to get going with netball and waiting a little bit impatiently, no doubt, for the resumption and the relaxation of the guidelines. The process, as you know, as well as we do, that it's been quite intense to navigate. And with the guidelines that government have actually released this time around about return to play are a lot more complex than they were for return to train, because we have lots of different age groups. We've got indoor and outdoor, and they are very, very, very complex. And it's been quite a process for the Netball team to navigate their way through what's a generic guideline versus a netball guideline. But we are excited that we've got green light. And so whilst it does seem in many cases that we've got one step forward and 3 steps back, we know that we are moving steadily in the right direction. So it's important, of course, that people get a chance to play for our physical and emotional well-being. We know you know that, that's why you're on board, and all credit to you guys for being really diligent and committed to make sure it's we're going to have it right. So I'm going to hand over to Mel Taylor and Amanda Basu, who is going to help navigate our way through this presentation today. So I'll turn myself off and over to you guys.
Thanks, Rosie, and it is great to have everyone online on a Friday afternoon, so thanks for joining in, and we've been super impressed and really, really happy with the response from the netball community and people wanting to gain more information and clarify any details and any questions about the return to community netball guidelines. Hopefully everyone's had a chance now to have a look at the guidelines, which have been updated or were updated on Wednesday. And we'll work our way through the key pieces of information this afternoon. Similar format to our previous set of information sessions a couple of weeks ago. I just wanted to share something really quickly. And after our stage 1, the return to training, again, we had a really great response, and it was good to see that people again, and clubs and associations were taking their time to get back on court. And there was a bit of hesitation that we felt, but these words are from a local club, and it was just an opportunity to share with you guys. And I think you would all have the same sentiment that netball is more than just about the sport. It's really about the healthy mind and healthy body stuff, and making sure that people have a point of social connection. And this particular club, they took on board the advice that they were provided, and then eased back in. They kept contact with their members throughout the period of real lockdown that we had, and they found that there was great benefit in that, which I'm sure you guys have as well. And then the transition back to court was they did take their time, but found that it didn't take too much extra hands or extra effort. And the reward when they did get back on was enormous in people being able to touch base again, see people face to face and have a real conversation and a bit of activity. So I just wanted to share that with you, and I'm sure that you guys have all got your own stories about how it is easing back into things. So as I said, the return to community netball guidelines were updated late Wednesday afternoon. And there is a lot of detail and there's a lot of resources out there, but we just want to make sure that when we break it down into its most simple format, there are 3 key messages that everyone is promoting, and we would like you guys to share as well. So if we can maintain that 1.5 metre physical distancing when not participating, the clear message to everyone is if you feel unwell, do not attend and continue to wash your hands. And in its simplest form, they're the 3 key points that we can't reiterate too often. Effective from 22nd of June, so on Monday, the restrictions eased, and we moved from use of outdoor courts only, and now we can use our indoor courts. So use of outdoor and indoor venues is now permitted. Contact training and competition for people 18 years of under could resume from the 22nd of June. The conversations that we're having with a lot of clubs and associations is that they're going to wait till after the school holidays in order to return, which is totally fine, and use the next couple of weeks to really plan and prepare for their transition back to either contact training or competition for that junior age group. At the minute, our adults, anyone over the age of 18, we're still confined to a non-contact training period. Training sessions need to be modified and adjusted so that people can maintain that 1.5 metre physical distance. And again, our 3 key messages: maintain that physical distance. If you feel unwell, don't attend, and continue to wash your hands.
Just before Mel jumps over to the next slide, there is a chat function. If you, down the bottom of your screen, there's a little bit of a bubble there. If you do have questions along the way, feel free to type them in. I'm monitoring those. We won't necessarily answer them as they pop up because I know what's coming in the presentation and Mel will most likely cover it, we hope. But certainly if you've got a thought in your head, pop it in there and I'll make sure we come to it if it's not covered.
Thanks, AB. Yes, I forgot to mention that. And we do love your questions. And if you've got a question, it's likely that a lot of other people have that same question. So please add it in. So what will be covered in the next hour or so, the website has been updated with, and all of our resources have been updated. So we have a new resource, Return to Community Netball Guidelines for Indoor Venues. We've updated the information for associations and clubs. And then there's a particular resource for Netball Victoria members. And we're asking you guys just to make sure that you download that and read and understand them. We've got a quick reference guide. And again, as Rosie said at the start, we're in a state where there's different pieces of information for different age groups and then indoor and outdoor venues. So those under the age of 18 years and under can do particular things, whereas adults have to wait a little bit longer. But those quick reference guides are really just a quick reference. And if you've got a quick question, you can have a look at that. The detail is really in the guidelines documents. And we've also updated our Return to Community Netball checklist. In particular for associations and clubs that have access to their own venues, then we're asking you to have another look at that checklist and work your way through it, given that we can now access indoor spaces. So just moving on, I won't show you guys those resources. I won't work through them in particular. We've pulled out the key points. So I encourage you to go and, if you haven't already, download them and have a look through them. So just onto age groups and limits. For those 18 years and under, groups of 20 participants is what we're saying. Participants can resume, plus essential support personnel. So when you're counting participants, we don't count things like people like coaches and umpires there in addition to the group of participants. And 18 years and under can resume contact training and competition. For adults over the age of 18, groups of 20, again, plus essential support personnel like coaches and umpires. And at the minute, it's non-contact training and no competition. So just in those group numbers, what we're suggesting is that you designate a particular area. And we're saying that it's easy to mark a court as a designated space or area, and stick with groups of 20. Just as a way to help you guys manage the number of people and coming into a particular area. 20 might not seem like a lot of people, but when you talk about multi-court venues, the number can add up quite quickly. And now we can also open the door to additional people like parents and guardians. So it's really just an attempt to help you guys to manage the number of people that are coming through a venue. So 18 years and under, the number is a little bit more flexible. We have a little bit more freedom with that, but in terms of the management stuff, we're suggesting groups of 20. All ages, minimise the use of shared equipment. So you can definitely use equipment now. Balls obviously need to be used on a match. In our initial rollout of the guidelines, we were suggesting that no use of bibs. We do need to bring bibs back into play now that competition can return, but the cleaning and sanitising of equipment between each use comes into play and is probably a little bit more important now. So bibs, Velcro bibs are easier to manage and you don't have to pull them over your head, but with you can still use over the shoulder bibs or over the head bibs. We're just suggesting that you wash them between each use. So depending on your club or your association, you may need to allocate equipment to particular teams or clubs. And we don't expect associations to take home 35 sets of bibs and wash them at the end of the night. Allocate that responsibility to coaches or team managers, or allocate that down the path.
Mel, before we move on from that slide, just a good question here about if two underage teams who've trained separately in their zone, could they come together for a practice match at the end of training?
So if they train on two separate courts and then come together?
Yep, that's the question.
Yep, yeah, that's fine. Yep, so as I said, the groups 18 years and under, there's a little bit more flexibility and a little bit more freedom with what they can do. It's really the tiny restrictions, or the restrictions still apply to those adults or over the age of 18. So a little bit more flexibility with what we can do with juniors. And because we can return to competition, then definitely you can do more match play and more contact training. So this slide's titled No Spectators, and I just want to try at this point to distinguish the difference between spectators and parents and guardians. And there's a little bit of difference between what we can do at indoor venues and what we can do at outdoor venues. So indoor venues, it's very clear that only people required to support participants should attend. And Netball Victoria, we're recommending that you guys, in order to manage, recommending that it's one parent or guardian per child. So if you've got 20 participants or 20 players on court, then we're saying you can potentially have 20 parents or guardians. Reason that we're not using the word spectators is because that can then include grandparents and other aunties and uncles, and you have everyone there. We understand that there's some attention or concern around just the number of people gathering in one space. So it's really a recommendation to try and help manage. So in particular for indoor venues, but also apply that to outdoor venues as well. All parents and guardians attending an event or a netball match need to abide by gathering restrictions, and there's some changes that are happening with those from a state government point of view as we go. But essentially all parents and guardians need to maintain 1.5 metre physical distance and gather in groups of no more than 10. As a way, again, to help you guys manage your venues and your areas, suggesting that maybe you mark out spaces where people can actually fit in a particular area, and guide and direct people. So signage, if you have cones in an area that mark where people can stand and where they can't stand, or if you need to block particular areas off, create barriers. That's fine. I think people are in a position where they're liking to have some direction at the minute, and it will help manage venues. Some venues are quite easy to manage. You know, a large outdoor recreation reserve, you've got plenty of space. You can mark areas where groups of 10 can stand together, as long as they maintain that 1.5 metre distance. But some of our indoor venues, we know that there's not a lot of space inside, and you might need to really allocate areas where you can accommodate groups of 10. That one person per 4 square metre rule also applies. So, which is quite a liberal area. There's quite a lot of space when you actually mark it out. But it will be venue specific. So have a look at your venues and work out what's going to work best. And then there have been particular questions around siblings. So we know that one parent or guardian, that parent or guardian has probably got 1 or 2 siblings that are also involved or also tagging along at a court. That's totally fine. They can definitely attend. We don't want to leave them home alone or locked in the car. So just count them in your group of 10. So you might have 5 adults and 5 kids gathering in a group of 10. We also know that kids are probably not going to stand on courtside. They're going to find a playground or a dirt to dig in, but still let them gather in the groups of 10. Any questions on spectators, AB?
Not spectators as yet. So I think the 2 questions that we have will be covered by your presentation moving forward. So if not, I will jump back in.
Perfect. So just on roles and responsibilities, for associations, clubs, teams, coaches, everyone that's involved, we want people to read and understand the updated guidelines. And for anyone online tonight, we want you to share the information with your members and ensure they understand their responsibilities. So there's a flow of responsibility. We're not placing any of this on the shoulder of one person. From a player to an umpire to a coach, if everyone does their bit, then it's going to be easier for everyone to manage, as long as they know what our expectations are and what their requirements are. So please use the resources that we have and filter that information. Make sure everyone has a copy of that one pager on for Netball Victoria members. Continue to communicate, so share those key messages, post information on your social pages, and continue to outline the expectations of people, and really take that shared approach. Allocate roles and responsibilities amongst your committee, and really make clear, if you're an association, what you're expecting of your clubs and your teams. I just wanted to touch on responsibility versus liability, and after the first release of information a couple of weeks ago, we had a lot of questions from associations and clubs about liability. So if someone contracts coronavirus at our association, can they take me to court? Can I be sued? Is it my responsibility? And so there's some more information up on Netball Victoria's website under the frequently asked questions section. But as an affiliated club or association with Netball Victoria, you are covered for public liability insurance. So that's all, as long as you follow the guidelines and as long as you do your best to follow the guidelines, then you're covered under that insurance. The responsibility is everyone's responsibility. Everyone has a role to play in this, and we expect everyone to play along. We also had some questions about individuals. So even individual player contracts coronavirus through the club or association, are they covered? The answer to that is no. It's personal accident insurance. So if you do your knee or pop a finger, then you're definitely covered. Under no circumstances are you covered anyway if you contract a virus. So as we said at the start, indoor and outdoor venues we can now use, which is fantastic. It just opens up a few more avenues for us to play and get involved, especially now it's winter. It's much better to go indoors and outdoors. Encouraging everyone, and I think it's happening anyway, but make sure you contact your local council or your venue manager to confirm access, especially now that we can move to indoor spaces. So if you're at an outdoor court, we can start to now use pavilions and change rooms and social areas at an indoor venue. They're now open for competition and training. So if you haven't recently, go back and have another conversation with council or your venue manager. Particular councils or venue managers have additional requirements. We're hearing that some people are still not able to access their indoor spaces, or there's specific requirements around those other people that can attend that are not involved in the actual game. So the best way to do it is to have a conversation. If you've got any particular questions or concerns, flick them through to us and we can see whether it's a common occurrence or not. And then some councils or venue managers are asking associations and clubs to complete either return to play plans or COVID safety plans. please use the resources that we have developed. Most of the local councils have access to or all of the councils have access to our guidelines. And the response from them is usually that if the club or association is following the State Sporting Association guidelines, then council are okay with that as well. So use those resources to cut and paste and make your jobs easier if you're required to complete one of those plans. Suggesting that everyone plans ahead and completes the updated checklist. Have a look at it, work your way through it, and again, have a walk through your venue and just make sure you're seeing all of the things that a participant would see. The amount of things that people touch and feel as they walk through a venue is pretty amazing. So do a walkthrough and complete the updated checklist. Use signage, communicate, use social media channels to let your members know what they can and can't do. The more often that we can communicate the key messages, the better. So for indoor facilities, depending on the space, they can be opened up to 20 people per space. So if you've got a change room, the change room can be opened. 20 people can enter into the change room at any one time, but everything is subject to the 1 person per 4 square metre rule. I've been in some change rooms and you would only get 1 person in there because they're pretty tight. So you might just, again, that walk through, have a look through your venue, work out how many people you can fit into a space, and then just let people know what the expectation is. Canteens and cafes can now open, but they come under the hospitality industry guidelines. So please make sure you have a look at those if you're running a canteen and cafe. The food handling stuff, we're totally fine and understand that you guys are already working under those guidelines anyway, in terms of food preparation and serving. The guidelines, again, 20 people in a cafe, a lot of the stuff is about takeaway, so picking up a drink or something to eat at a canteen. All you need to do is make sure that you've got those 1.5 metre physical distancing and can manage the flow of people and the movement of people through those common areas. And again, display signage and manage the access, and especially those entry and exit points. For both indoor and outdoor venues, facilities, when people enter into an indoor space, we are now required to record their attendance as well. So for parents and guardians coming into a space, for change rooms, we're just, recommend that only players or direct participants use those. Don't have any family members or parents and participants that come into those spaces. It just creates additional management issues. So anyone that's coming into an indoor venue, a stadium, as an example, we need to record their attendance. So that's parents, guardians, players, coaches, umpires, everyone, staff, volunteers, anyone that's coming in there, we need to record their attendance. We need to record their name, the time of the session that they come into, and their phone number. As training rolled out, there were a number of clubs and associations who were using different methods of collecting and recording attendance. People moved to apps or online Google Sheets or whatever. Continue to use those things. You just now need to work out a way of capturing those additional people, so the parents and spectators. So anyone entering an indoor facility, you need to record. For those outdoor netball courts that have indoor spaces, you also need to record the people coming into an indoor space. But we understand that outdoor venues, it's much harder to collect information about parents and guardians. If you're playing on a court in the northern end of your facility, then you may not know that they're actually there, and you don't really want them walking all the way through a facility to record their details at the competition office, as an example. So for outdoor courts, we're suggesting that you're required to still collect the details of participants, coaches, umpires, scorers, anyone that's involved in the game. But spectators or parents and guardians are a little bit harder to manage for outdoor facilities.
So Mel, I'll just jump in on the end of that, because there is a question that relates to maintaining attendance. And it's something that it's possible will vary from venue to venue in terms of the venue manager's request. But what we've been working with Sport and Rec Victoria, Aligned Leisure, YMCA and Belgravia amongst and councils is that where we're running a competition, that team information can feed up. So that you're not potentially having a line at the front door of a venue and signing everyone in, that it could be the responsibility of the team. The team manager collects, just like they have with training, they collect the details relating to the team, and that just feeds up a chain. We certainly want to make this as simple as possible, and as Mel said, there's lots of different ways that you can capture that, but the score sheet and just capturing the extra people who aren't involved in the actual game on the back of the score sheet may be the simplest option.
Absolutely, and encourage you guys to pass that responsibility down to clubs and teams. It's easier for them to collect information than it is for it to come through one central point. Their responsibility to hold on to that information and provide it if it's required, but yeah, make it as easy as possible.
Yep, and there's just one more question on that topic about if we don't let people indoors, do we have to keep the list? And no, if they don't enter the venue, then they don't have to be recorded. But I'd certainly think your parents, you're one parent per child, it would be quite difficult, particularly in your younger age groups. There's that keenness from the parent to eyeball their child at all times. So it's possibly not as simple as just locking the front door after you get the kids in, but working out the happy compromise.
Yeah, and in the next couple of days, so by the end of next week, we hope to have some more information available on the website, but just some options for you guys and some technology that you might want to look at. If you've already got a really good system, then you can continue to use that. Something like My Netball is going to help you record the attendance of the participants, the people directly involved in the game. We're not suggesting that you need to duplicate that. If you're collecting it already once, don't come up with another system. Here that Team App can also collect player data as well as parents and guardians as add-ons. So that's another good option, but we'll have a look at some ideas and share that in the next week as well.
There's just a question here, and we all know when it rains, everyone dives for the shelters, and managing that situation. That is going to be a tricky one. Some places have wonderful, wonderful shelters that will accommodate everyone, but that's the rarity as opposed to the norm. I think we're going to have to go encourage everyone to bring their umbrellas, because everyone can't squeeze into the shelter like we have once upon a time. And where we've got some courts that allow us to keep playing in the rain, we're just going to have to unfortunately be tough on our parents. If the kids are okay to be out there on the court, then the parents are going to have to manage under an umbrella in their socially distanced space. So.
That's a good idea, AB. I think an umbrella would, one of those big golf umbrellas is also going to help with the 1.5 metre physical distancing. Maybe we just mandate that anyway.
I think there's Vixen's umbrellas available in the merchandise shop. All right, back to you, Mel.
Thanks. So health and hygiene messages, and this applies to everyone, not only the people involved in our game, but our volunteers, our administrators, our parents and guardians. So the clear message is, if you feel unwell, please do not attend. Continue to wash your hands, cover your coughs and sneezes, maintain that 1.5 metre physical distance, and download the COVID Safe app. So the recording attendance and the COVID Safe app are really key things to help if there is a situation that we need to track and trace. That's the method that we're using to track and trace. So it's really a directive of government to try and help that process. So if we can, we're not mandating it, but encourage everyone to download the COVID Safe app. Just as a next level, I guess. So do not attend if you have had close contact with a known or suspected case of COVID-19. We're starting to see a bit of a re-emergence of the number of this, and you would have seen the response from schools. So if you've had close contact with a known or suspected case, please do not attend. If you've had close contact with a known or suspected case, follow the instructions of the Department of Health and Human Services. And anyone experiencing COVID-19 symptoms should get tested. And the schools are providing us with a pretty good example of the process that's rolled out. So if there's a known case or someone has tested positive in a school, usually what happens is the school shut down for a day. They go through a deep clean. Contact tracing occurs as quickly as possible. Anyone that's had direct contact or close contact is asked to self-quarantine or go and get tested, or both of those things. And then everyone else that's not directly exposed can return to school quite quickly. It's usually only 24 hours. We're suggesting that that's exactly the same process that we follow. So if there is an identified or a positive case at your club or at your association, then the Department of Health and Human Services processes will kick into place, and we follow the direction of those guys and whatever they advise us to do. So anyone with a direct or an immediate contact, and then we're just continuing to promote that if you've got symptoms, go and get tested. And there's a bit of a blitz at the minute on testing. So encouraging everyone that is required to do that. Just on these points, we've also had a number of questions, especially after the release of our first lot of information. There are a number of people within our netball communities that work in the health industry, or that are teachers and work within education or childcare. Now, some of those healthcare workers are working on a COVID-19 ward or regularly testing people, so they are often coming into contact with a suspected case. We made some inquiries with Department of Health and Human Services, and their advice was pretty much take a common sense approach, but they don't need to withdraw from any particular they don't need to withdraw from life because that's their job. So again, if they're feeling unwell, they can monitor that. But within a health industry, they're working under really tight guidelines. They're using all the personal protective equipment that they can, and they know and understand the process. So they should go and have a chat with their employer, but we're definitely not suggesting that they can't participate. They can come back into the netball community and start to train with their team members as well.
I'll give Mel a bit of a breather there before she moves on to the next slide and just pop through a couple of the questions. So playing a second game or coaching more than one team, these things are now okay. We have mentioned in the first step to try and narrow it down to play one game or train once, pick your preferred team instead of training across the week. But for kids now playing a game, that's fine. What we would advise is between each game, make sure you're sanitising or washing your hands before you get back into it. The same applies for the coach. And if the coach is rolling over equipment, then they should be cleaning that as well in between the two different sessions. And on that same theme, if there's illness that's affecting teams and that's going to stop the game getting up, yep, absolutely be a little bit creative and merge a couple of teams together. I think the key thing in this is getting the kids back on the court, because we've missed it so much that we do need to be adapt and be flexible in how we can provide netball, so we can just simply provide it. So that's fantastic that you're thinking along those lines.
Yeah, and just on the multiple players, multiple teams question, that has come through a lot in the last couple of days, and absolutely you can go back to playing with multiple teams. The only other thing we would suggest is there's likely to be less opportunities for community netball. You know, in order to manage the flow of people and making sure that you don't have everyone, you know, those transition times between the start and the end of a match can be quite chaotic. We're suggesting that you stagger start times, and so you might allow 10 or 15 minutes between the end of one game and the start of the next game, just to allow people to move out of the space and to allow the next wave of people or teams to come into the space. That might mean that you lose a time slot over a day or a night, meaning that there's less teams that can play, or there's more buys that will enter into your competition. If one player is playing 5 games a week, then all they need to think about, and we're not directing anything here, but are they taking up 4 positions that 4 other individual players could potentially be taking up? So we understand that everyone plays multiple times a week, and we love that about netball. You can play in as many teams as you like, across many associations and clubs, but just making sure that we're providing maximum opportunities for the maximum number of people to participate as we can.
I think you've half answered another question there, Mel, in that we've got another association here with a big court venue, 18 courts, and just talking about how we try and fixture that competition. So yes, technically you can run 18 courts at once under the guidelines, and we've literally asked that direct question about, I think we go up to a 22 court venue in Victoria, and yes, you can, as long as you're meeting all the requirements, you can play all those courts. Do you want to, and can you manage the ins and outs of that many people at once? So it's about how you consider making it easy for yourself as an association as well. And can you leave a few courts blank? Can you stagger your times? All those things, and we'll go through a couple of more examples as we work through.
Yeah, and those large venues, you might have a northern bank and a southern bank, and you can start for half of your courts at one time and then allow 15 minutes and start the other half. So depending on your timing system and whether that's possible. If you work off central timing, it's a little bit harder. So the more people, it will just take more time to get everyone in and everyone out. Also the number of entry and exit points. So if your facility only has one entry point, then that's going to take a longer period of time for people to get in. If you can nominate a wider variety or a wider number of entry points, the crowd's going to disperse more quickly. So just managing those points where people can congregate, and then communicating that really clearly to people. If you're playing on courts 1, 2, 3, and 4, you enter via gate 1, and make sure you sign that properly.
Yeah. And just had a question about whether training, saying training is compulsory now. Our advice still remains that it should be opt-in. There's a lot of different feelings in the community about COVID and how people are coming out of their bubbles. Some people are not quite coming out of their bubbles yet. So our suggestion is still to be optional. And the more that people see others coming out and engaging in training, that's going to hopefully make them feel more comfortable entering that environment at their own pace.
Yeah, absolutely. AB, I don't know if you want to talk about the Parkville example as how they're structuring at the minute.
Yep, okay. So Parkville at the State Netball Hockey Centre, so the indoor side of that competition, there are 2 halls for those who are not familiar with the State Netball Hockey Centre, a 2-court hall and a 3-court hall. For the new season of Parkville, they will be timed as 2 separate areas, so that there won't be 5 courts loading at the same time. There'll be 2 and there'll be 3. So they will be still centrally timed in their separate halls. There will be a 70-minute time slot so that there's enough time to clear the venue, do the clean before the next teams come in, and have a little bit of warm-up time on the court. So we don't have people trying to find those all those corridors and whatnot they normally do, try and throw a ball around in to warm up. So that's how the indoor venue's working. Parkville's also using Riverside in Ascot Vale while the State Netball Hockey Centre is under redevelopment, which is an outdoor venue. And they're looking, again, having the longer time slot, but that's a fenced venue. And the plan is to let people in a particular entry only when their game, at an allotted time before their game. And once the venue is cleared, the gates will be closed and the next teams will not be, the gates won't be opened until the next team comes through. So those courts will also be staggered because there's quite a volume of courts there that gives us a little bit of the flexibility. But they're just some of the ideas so that you can start thinking about your venues and thinking about the nuances and the different things. There will also be alternate exits at the State Netball Hockey Centre that we're working through with the venue. So it's getting creative about what was once an emergency exit now becomes possibly the permanent exit. So these are the things we just need to work through.
Yep. And allow yourself time. You might want to fixture the first 2 rounds at a particular time, or do a run through with a bit of a practice run through. That cleaning and sanitizing, we're not really too sure how long that's going to take. Will depend on the number of hands that you guys can get involved. But changing equipment if it's required. Wiping down team benches, score cards, stuff like that. It might just take you a little bit of time. Once you get into a new groove and a new rhythm, that time will adjust, and it might it might take you less time as you go, but just think about all of the things that need to happen in between, and know that it's going to probably take you a little bit longer than normal. So really stagger those start times, or allow yourself a little bit more time between matches.
And yep, just a comment just about whether you need someone at your entrances. If the flow works, then no. You might need to monitor that. That might be something you need to wait and see, like keep an eye on. But hopefully we're all getting very good at this social distancing, where we do it in everyday life now. But again, you're just going to have to monitor your venue. And I think Mel brought up an example the other day that there are venues who have looked at, if you're playing on court 1, that you park in this particular area so your path is directly to court 1. So there are also some intuitive things that you can potentially do that help direct your flow of traffic, that make it that people don't even know they're following a direction, but you've given them a way to do it. Ian's made a very good point. If people aren't turning up for training but they're turning up for the games, just like my mum, if you don't turn up for training, you don't get a game. That's certainly ingrained in me. So that's certainly, if someone's just shirking the training, because the game's so much more fun, isn't it, than actually turning up to training on a cold night. That's a reasonable ingrained part of our culture, I think, in netball. No train, no play, or you get less game time than the ones that do rock up for those wintry nights that we're approaching.
Yeah, I'd maybe just have a conversation with the individual that's not training and ask them some questions about why they're not training. If it's COVID related, then maybe you'd be a little bit flexible. If it's because I can't be bothered, or I was getting my hair done or something like that, then that's a bit different. So in terms of the next steps, we are planning, so our guidelines make reference to mid-July. We are planning for the return of adult contact training on the 13th of July, and then the return of adult competition on the 20th of July. That's all pending government restrictions and the easing of government restrictions, but that's definitely what Netball Victoria is planning for our competitions, and encourage you guys to do that same, or use those same timelines. With the return of competition, and similar to Ian's point earlier, you guys might need to have a look at your bylaws or your competition rules and just see what needs to be tweaked and adjusted. We're obviously advocating that everyone comes back and it's there for social and emotional well-being and just to reconnect. But once we start scoring, then competition rules definitely come into play. So you might need to adjust, player qualification details, uniform bylaws. We've got a bit of a document that we'll send out post or early next week, just with some suggestions about the areas of your bylaws that you might need to review or look at, and to monitor that as you go. But it might just be something that during this period, during the next couple of weeks, that you can have a look at. And Netball Victoria will take on the responsibility of monitoring government information, in particular at this stage relating to the hotspots that have been identified. And as of yesterday, I think it was, that the 6 LGAs have been identified into 10 suburbs where the concerns really lie. And any additional information that comes out of there, we will pass on as quickly as we can to the netball community. At this stage, the advice is quite clear that, if you're feeling unwell, go and get tested, and there's a testing blitz at the minute in those particular areas. We are not suggesting, and we can't, that there's no legal requirement for those areas to be shut down or for people from those areas to be restricted in what they can and can't do. The same principles apply. So if anyone from any community is feeling unwell, then please stay away. And if you have symptoms, go and get tested. I think the message at the minute is just go and get tested anyway, regardless of symptoms or how you're feeling. But if anything changes on that, we'll make sure that we update you guys as soon as we possibly can.
So I'll just jump in and take this. There's a question about education facilities, and we have been working with education as a pretty significant partner for some of our associations and clubs. To date, outdoor community facilities, the Department of Education has issued a communication that they should open. and indoor from the 29th of June. Now, while the department's issued that, it is still beholden on the principal and the school council. They can make a decision that is different to that. We have seen some wonderful support from some of our education providers. So if you are having trouble with your site, please reach out and we will see what we can do. But it is a local decision for the principal and the school council. But yes, we've had some really good wins in some areas. So certainly let us know. Yep, and that's fantastic. Ian, it's just confirming Northern Pride have had theirs, and we've certainly seen Waverley District, Essendon, Bendigo Strathdale, which are some of our biggest associations on schools, which is fantastic. Mel, sanitising between games, if you could just give us a rundown of the specific requirements.
So sanitising between games for individuals, so all the people need to go and wash their hands, use sanitizer. Things like if the balls, so some associations have suggested that they will allocate balls per round, or others are suggesting that each club or team provides their own equipment. You guys work out what the requirements are and what's going to work best for your association, but just again make sure that that's communicated really clearly. So any equipment or anything that's touched pretty much needs to be wiped down at the end. Any coaches or player benches should be wiped down, and you can use wipes or a spray and wipe and a chucks, whatever is accessible to you, and just have a process of doing that. Whose responsibility is it, and make sure that it actually gets done. So you can allocate volunteers from your club or association. Some people are suggesting that umpires might stick up their hand and do a bit of extra work at the end of their game. Whatever's going to work for your association and whoever you can trust and rely on to do that. But yeah, pretty much anything that anyone touches during the game needs to be cleaned and wiped down. Bibs and the like should be cleaned or washed at the end of every session. Goalpost padding, just wipe that down quickly at the end of the game too.
Yeah. And don't hesitate to ask for help. There are many people that stand around your courts who, if you give them a job, will quite happily take it on if they know what they have to do. I must say, the 15-year-old girls who coach my daughter's netball team very intuitively just started cleaning netballs at the end of last week's session. So who would have thought 15-year-olds cleaning? But they just jumped in and got it done because it's about netball, not cleaning their room. Just had a question here about whether there's a separate Netball Vic policy for COVID. Under the requirements, we've submitted a return to play plan through to the government, which that's been in for weeks, and that will be updated now with in line with these new announcements and the return to indoor. But that remains our only policy, and in addition, the guidelines and the documents that are available on the COVID specific page of our website. And the only other question I hear about is VNL. So that's good to hear that someone is eagerly waiting for a return date for the VNL. It won't be too far away. We hope to have something public soon, but there's a lot of work being done behind the scenes with our VNL clubs and our VNL crew at Netball Victoria to get that competition up and away, which it will be happening. It's just working out the finer details in line with these requirements and redoing a fixture, etc., just like you all are.
Back
to you, Mel.
Just quickly want to mention the state government short-term survival package was announced a couple of weeks ago, and funding is available to help clubs and associations cover fixed costs during the period of lockdown. Clubs can apply for up to $1,000 and associations, depending on where they're at and their structure, can apply anywhere between $7,500 to $15,000. We have received feedback from a lot of associations who have looked into it and said, actually, we're not eligible based on the criteria. And a lot of that is because our netball associations are very forward thinking and plan ahead and plan for the future. And you've developed a bit of a sinking fund and maybe have some plans to redevelop or to develop a facility So you've put some money away for a rainy day or for a well thought out plan, which technically means you're ineligible for this funding. We're suggesting you stick your hat in the ring anyway and throw in an application. Be honest with your finances, acknowledge the fact that you've got a bucket of money sitting there, but it's for a particular purpose and it will be expended for that particular purpose. We're happy to adjust our letter of support and acknowledge that as well. There's no punishment for putting in an application. It's just that you might be knocked back. So if you can deal with another knockback in 2020, then throw in an application and see how you go. For clubs, as AB said yesterday, it's the easiest $1,000 you'll ever receive. There's 2 questions on the application form. It would take you 10 minutes to submit. So for any association that does have a club structure, then please encourage your clubs to apply. There is still money in that bucket, but it will disappear at some point. So,
and it does close at the end of this month, so we're just days away from it closing, but do not miss the opportunity.
And finally, just wanted to outline we initially, with the rollout of our guidelines, we had a frequently asked questions document. We've moved all of our frequently asked questions onto the website so that we can update that more regularly and more frequently, because they're frequently asked questions. They're not just commonly asked questions. So we'll update that as we go. And the last couple of days, we have received a lot of questions, and we'll update our website with that information. But if you need any of the resources, or if you do have a question, have a look at that page first. If it's not answered on that page, or if you can't get the information that you require, then please feel free to email participation@Netball Vic, and we'll respond to you as quickly as we can. There is no question that's too small or too insignificant or too silly. Anything that you think of that you, even just to seek clarification, please feel free to make contact, and we'll get back to you as soon as we can.
Well done, Mel and Amanda. Excellent again, and really full credit to Mel and Amanda for their being able to come up with all the details required so quickly. Look, that's it for today's session. As Mel said, no question too big or too small. Please shoot it through to that email address that you can see there. This session has been recorded also, so you can always access that later on. It's very dynamic at the moment, as you can tell. Things are changing quickly, so please keep an eye on Netball Victoria's website. We hope that we get to see you around a court very, very soon. So thank you everybody for jumping online today. That just about concludes our session. Anything lastly from Mel or AB before we sign off? No. Oh, good. All good. All right. Thank you. Thank you everyone for joining us today. Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye.